Welcome back to Close Up. The Center for Effective Lawmaking ranked her as the most effective Democratic senator on Capitol Hill. Now, she wants to take her get-it-done approach to the White House. Amy Klobuchar is our guest this morning. Senator, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's great to be back.
So part of being an effective senator is working across the aisle. What is it that you do differently, perhaps, than any other in order to get your bills passed?
Well, actually, it is in the model of your two great senators here, Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan. And it's this idea that if you go to work every day and you just think about what do I need to get done for the people of my state or of this country in the case of the president, everything else melts away. And for me, I look for common ground. And it doesn't mean that you don't stand your ground, especially right now with people like Mitch McConnell in power, you have to do that. It just means you try to figure out this person will work with me on rural broadband. And so you introduce and pass a bill. This person cares about small businesses and exports and making sure that we have an education system that works for the entrepreneurs we want to train. Something else New Hampshire cares a lot about. And you find it and you introduce it and you pass it. It's really that straightforward. And some of that means that your rhetoric at least has to be something where you are reaching out and trying to bring people with you instead of just beating them up all the time. And it's one of the reasons I pass bills, but it's also how I'm running this campaign. You know, I think at that debate stage this coming week, when I'm out there, I'm very aware of the fact that you're going to have independents and moderate Republicans who are not happy with Donald Trump who are watching that debate. And it's the way you bring them in to get the votes in the general election. But most importantly, it's the way you govern. And I don't want to be the president for just half of America. I want to be the president for all of America.
If you're the president and Mitch McConnell is still the leader in the Senate, hard to imagine he's going to be wanting to bring forward any bill on gun violence. So how do you convince him to do that if you're the president? And certainly we've heard from other candidates, oh, well, I'm going to take my case to the American people. Seems like that's been done and it hasn't worked.
Change, though. Change going on right now. When you look at the numbers, there was a recent poll that showed the majority of Trump voters want to see sensible background checks, which I wish had gotten the governor had not vetoed here in New Hampshire. And the majority of Trump voters want to see it. You've got majority of hunters want to see it, and I think there's been a sea change because after what happened in El Paso and Dayton and then Midland, Texas, and you look at what's happened in Parkland and other places, one by one people said, wait a minute. I'm a responsible gun owner. I'm a hunter, they've said, but I am not going to be on the side of these kinds of mass murderers. And if there's a way to stop them from getting a gun, and in many cases an assault weapon, we should do it. And that's why I favor moving forward on these bills. And Mitch McConnell, I'm not even waiting to be president for this. He's got to do it next week. He's got to call these bills up for a vote. They will pass. It is in his hands.
We hear talk of hunters and sportsmen on this issue. It seems almost archaic because now the pro-gun people are saying our guns are, it's an arsenal against government tyranny, essentially. That's their right under the Second Amendment. Do you think, though, that if they are taking care of the AR-15, practicing gun safety, they lock it away, how are they part of the problem?
Well, first of all, not all the gun owners are saying that exact same thing. I think a lot of them say, just as our U.S. Supreme Court has said, I have a right to have a gun. And they do. Hunting is incredibly important in Minnesota and in New Hampshire. They have a right to have a gun, but you also have a right to have gun safety rules in place to protect people. And what these bills do, and I always say, does this hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand? It doesn't. What these bills do is say, okay, let's make sure that the cops have enough time to vet, to make sure that this person doesn't have a serious conviction or doesn't have some kind of major mental health issue in their past. Okay. Number two, let's close these loopholes so the same rules apply if you get a gun at a gun show or not. And then third, and these are things that I think would be helpful in certain cases, close the boyfriend loophole. That's my bill. Make sure that people that are convicted of serious domestic abuse can't go out there and get an AK-47 because they often use them to kill people in their household, whether it is a spouse or a girlfriend. So those are common sense bills on Mitch McConnell's desk right now. In addition to that, I would put limits on magazines, look at that assault weapon ban that I support. But for right now, we just can't wait till we have a new president. We've got to get these bills done now.
You have a new rural plan out. This isn't a big state, but New Hampshire has lots of rural land. So how would your legislation benefit, or your plan benefit New Hampshire?
Well, you have thousands of farms here, and I got to visit one small farm, and that's an important part of your economy. And you also have rural communities, a big percentage of rural communities. I think 1/3 of Granite Staters live in rural areas. So to me, that means not one size fits all. Rural hospitals, rural education are different. You've got to make sure you have what we call critical access hospitals, otherwise there would be no health care at all in rural areas. Rural broadband. I was the first candidate to come out with an infrastructure plan because I saw the need for rural broadband in places like New Hampshire, as well as commuter rail to places like Manchester and the area around here. And we have a president that has not delivered on those promises. And then finally, issues like opioid addiction, mental health, hurt all of New Hampshire, but have been particularly hard in some of the rural areas. And that's why, of course, again, I'm the first candidate to come out with this plan, because I listened to the people here, and they told me, look, we've made some changes that have been good, but we still have too many people getting addicted on opioids, and too many people either committing suicide or struggling with mental illness without a place to get help.
Moving to foreign policy, the president has just recently said that he does expect to keep about 9,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. If you're president of the United States in 2021, are you bringing them home?
I would like to bring those troops home, and I would like to do it sooner rather than later. Right now, kids that are being sent over to Afghanistan from the U.S., many of them were not even born when we started getting involved in that conflict, because we've been there now over 18 years. So my hope would be, and the president has never been that good at working with allies, as we know from how he precipitously got out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, the Russian nuclear agreement, is that we work with our allies. We obviously push as hard as we can to keep all those democracy gains in place with a plan of bringing those troops home.
Speaking of the military, it's clear that all the Democrats in this race would like to do things to address systemic racism in the United States. So if you're president, would you pledge to rename the 10 military facilities in the United States that are named after Confederate generals, including Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, and Fort Hood?
Well, I think that's something we should look at, and would want to consult with the military and consult with the people in each state and make a good decision about that, because we've renamed things over the years. I don't like that the Washington, D.C. football team's called the Redskins. I've taken a strong position on that one. And over time, you rename places, and you've got new heroes that emerge from wars and everything from the Iraq War on. We have new people, people that have won Purple Hearts, people that have served our country, and things do get renamed. And I think it's always a good thing to look at renaming.
So rather than look at, would you just do it, though?
Well, I would want to get input from the military and from the people around, but I think overall it's a good idea.
Overall, Democrats looking for somebody who's going to beat President Donald Trump. Why are you that candidate?
We need someone leading the ticket that can bring people along with them, not shut them out. And I am not running for chair of the Democratic National Committee. I'm someone that's running for president of the United States. And when you look at my track record, it's one of, when I lead the ticket, I bring along independents, moderate Republicans, those voters that we need to win. I'm from the Midwest. We didn't fare well in the presidential election in the Midwest last time. And I'm someone that likes to get things done. And so I believe when you've got someone like Donald Trump that tries to divide people all the time, that literally wakes up every morning and says, how can I go after immigrants? How can I go after people of color? And you have someone like that. You want someone very different running against him. And that's someone that says to those voters that may have voted for him and are now having second thoughts, wait a minute, what's he doing for you when it comes to pharmaceutical prices? They've gone up, not down. What's he doing for you in this trade war to our farmers and some of our workers who are being hurt by this? We have a trade deficit that it's worse than it's ever been, $891 billion. How about the debt? New Hampshire cares a lot about fiscal responsibility. This is a guy that has added to the debt. That tax bill added over $1 trillion more money on the shoulders of the people of this hardworking state. And so those are the kinds of cases that I'm going to be able to make with credibility because of my record and what I've done on these issues in the past.
All right, Senator Klobuchar, thank you for joining us on Close Up.
Very good.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.